Hello, my name's Blossoms and welcome to another Genshin Impact video. And today we are going to be taking a look at and talking about energy recharge and how to gain energy and how to just get out as many elemental bursts as you possibly can. I know there are a lot of newer players still coming to the game, believe it or not, and I felt like this would be a good refresher course for some of maybe the veteran players, and maybe you just find some stuff and some tips that you didn't actually know yourself. So I wanted to bring this out, just go ahead and get some of these tips out here, make a little dedicated video to some energy recharge and energy and how it all works, just so everybody understands how to most effectively get their elemental burst as fast as possible. But before we pop into the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more Genshin Impact content like this. It really helps out the channel and I deeply appreciate it. As well as, if I do leave anything out in this video, please feel free to let me know in the comment section below, and I would love to go ahead and pin your comment or, heart it, all that jazz, just to give it that recognition so everybody can get all of the information that they can about energy recharge. First thing you need to know is how energy is generated. First of all, you can simply generate energy by normal attacking. You get about 1 energy per 4 auto attacks or so. It's not a very effective way to generate energy, but know that normal attacking does build a little bit of energy. And then second off, you can get some energy via elemental skills. Now, when you use these elemental skills, you get what are called colored elemental particles. These are particles that are more suited towards a certain element, meaning characters of that element get more energy from those kinds of particles. And that is one of the most essential things to gaining as much energy as you can. One big tip I see a lot of players missing out on is they use their skills and they swap to another character too fast, and then that character gets the wrong element orbs and doesn't get as much energy as the previous character could have got. So oftentimes what you need to do is use your skill, stay on the field, wait for the orbs to come into you as you can visibly see them coming to you, and as soon as they do, then you can swap to another character, and that is going to boost your elemental burst efficiency an absolute ton. I've had some people come into the chat being like, hey, I have 180% energy recharge and I'm just not getting my burst that fast. What am I doing wrong? And I told them that, and that seemed to help them out a ton. So that is going to be one major thing that you're going to want to focus on there. Now, we will get a little bit more into that in just a moment, but I do want to talk about the third way to generate energy, which is going to be reducing enemies to a certain health threshold or defeating them. So getting enemies to a certain threshold is generally going to generate some energy, and as well as defeating them is going to generate some energy, and they are usually pretty good chunks themselves. And now that we got all of those out of the way, let's circle back a little bit around to that second method, talking about those elemental skills and colored particles. Now, you get those colored particles from using your elemental skills, and those elemental skills are going to generate different amounts of particles, and they're going to generate those colored particles. And as I mentioned before, those colored particles are going to be attuned to a specific element, and that element is going to get the most benefit from taking in those particles. Now, I'm going to be putting up a little chart here just for reference as to how much energy each character gets of being the same element or a different element, if they were the character that originated those particles or not. So as you see here, if you stay on the field, you get substantially more energy for that character. But say that character has their burst already and you use their skill, but you have a character of the same element, you can swap to that character of the same element, and you're going to get more bang for your buck on that character than you would swapping to another character of a different element. As shown by this chart, the differences are actually quite huge, and I feel like this really puts it into perspective. These are just telling you the amount of energy you get here, and you can see that it is just a substantial amount of the difference here, and that's why I was saying that is so important to make sure that you are staying on the field to get your orbs, or at least swapping to a character of the same element, making elemental resonance teams even stronger than they were already. If you really want an elemental burst spam, you're going to need at least 1 elemental resonance, in my opinion, as that's just going to facilitate those elemental burst spams that much easier. Now that we understand how energy is generated, as well as who to give it to, I did want to reiterate on a point that I made there previously, talking about that each skill generates different amounts of energy. Usually you get more energy the longer the cooldown is for the skill. That is typically how it works. So typically characters with long cooldowns like Xingqiu generate a bunch of orbs that will generate a ton of energy for him, which is why you can typically, if you're running a good energy recharge, Xingqiu get his burst in about 2 of his E's. Now, one more thing that plays into this factor is not only the amount of orbs that are created, but the cost of the elemental burst you are trying to spam. Now, the hardest elemental burst amount to spam is 80 cost elemental burst. They're the highest in the game, and they're quite costly. Getting them to actually get their elemental burst on cooldown can be quite a challenge. You're definitely going to need to take advantage of things like having the elemental resonance on your team composition. That's going to help you out a ton. But there are generally 3 different levels of elemental burst costs, that being 40, 60, and 80, and then there is one exception to those 3 being Zhao at 70 costs, which he's still a little bit in between, so you're going to have to play him a little bit in between. And these costs are very important, as if you have a whole 40 cost team, then you're not going to necessarily need to worry about things like that elemental resonance. You're also not going to need to worry about building too much for energy recharge, as then you can focus a little bit more on your stats for the other aspects there. But you're also still going to want a mix of the different elemental burst costs, as typically that's just going to be the most effective with who we currently have in the game. Maybe one day we'll have a bunch of 40 cost elemental bursts that are just absolutely devastating. We do have some great ones right now, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that's going to be the most effective team at the moment, is only having 40 cost burst. So you're definitely going to want to mix it up, as they have different costs for a reason. Typically the higher cost, the more powerful the ability can be. This isn't true for everybody, but this does relatively remain true, and you typically just need to balance that act a little bit on your team. You're also going to want different energy recharge values depending on the elemental burst cost for that character. So with that gets us into the topic of your actual energy recharge value. Typically, when you go for energy recharge, you want to go for it in the substats, as you can get some pretty solid energy recharge substats without having any main stat energy recharge. Now, if your character is a dedicated support, I would recommend going for more of that energy recharge main stat on maybe something like the Sands, but you don't necessarily have to if you do have that good energy recharge substats, or maybe you have a weapon with a really good energy recharge substat. We'll get more into weapons in just a moment, but yes, you're going to want different levels of energy recharge depending on the cost of your elemental burst. And typically you can find yourself at, if you have something like a 40 cost elemental burst, you'll typically want around 140 to around 150 energy recharge to be able to pop that off of cooldown if you're playing effectively. And then for 60 cost, you can typically sit in the range of 160 to 170. And then, as you can imagine, for 80 cost, you can typically sit in the realm of 180 to 200, as those are probably going to be the most comfortable ranges and most attainable ranges. Now, you can get some crazy energy recharge values. Like I can make my Bennett get to like 230 energy recharge or something like that. And that definitely helps a ton, but there is definitely going to be a point in which you are simply putting too much into energy recharge and not enough into other aspects of the character. Maybe like something that they scale off, like maybe they're an HP scaling character, or maybe they can just do really good damage if you focus more on their crit rate and crit damage or something, and you sacrifice that for energy recharge. So you definitely want to consider that. But typically those ranges are going to be good benchmarks for you to sit at. Of course, more is going to be better if you can also still have really great stats, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. And as I mentioned before, these values can also be relatively mitigated with solid team comps of dual resonance combos, or, you know, just having that elemental resonance on your team, and also just staying on the field to grab all of your orbs. If you're playing well, typically you can kind of circumvent some of your energy recharge problems just by, you know, playing well. Now, as I mentioned, I also wanted to talk about weapons. There are plenty of weapons in the game with an energy recharge substat, and some of the most important ones are going to be something like the Favonius weapon line here. Lately, I've been playing some elemental burst spam teams myself, one of them being Rosaria with her Favonius spear. And then having Diona on the team as well with her Favonia's Warbow, and they both just constantly are generating energy from the passives on these, as well as having huge energy recharge substats. This spear not so much, but the bow most certainly, and I am able to constantly spam their burst. And this also, these orbs that are generated from this passive are neutral orbs, so they go to our teammates a little bit more effectively as well, allowing them to spam their burst a little bit more effectively. So it's a really strong combo. I typically recommend having at least one of these kind of energy recharge weapons, whether it's the passive that provides a little bit energy over time, or if it's something like the Favonius lineup. That's going to help you out a ton as they generate those neutral orbs, and they just allow you to facilitate that support character's elemental burst constantly, which is going to help your team out a ton. So that's pretty much the main points I wanted to cover, and I did want to go back over the nuance that I mentioned earlier about the fact that different skills generate energy in different ways, so it can be very different for different characters. So like as I said before, somebody like Fischl, she has a 60 energy cost, so I said something around the range of 150 energy recharge, 160 energy recharge could be really beneficial for those costs. However, Fischl generates so much energy with her E-skill that you can really sacrifice more energy recharge on her than the typical 60 cost kind of character. So it is going to vary character to character, and you're going to want to pay attention to just how many orbs they're generating for themselves with their E-skills and how frequently they're generating them in order to think about the best energy recharge value for them. Now, somebody like Hu Tao here, her E-skill is a little bit different, as during its duration, it just has a chance to generate some energy orbs while she's attacking, and that can vary, in very different ways. So, and then there's also somebody like Albedo, who works in a very similar fashion, who only has a 40 energy cost, but when he generates energy off of the field, so typically he is not on the field to pick up his orbs, as his E-skill works off of the field most of the time. That can go for Fischl as well. Typically it doesn't matter too much, but you're also going to want to note that that is just going to be an aspect to it. He's going to be generating energy randomly with his E-skill, so you're not really going to be able to time it as well as you might have otherwise. Now, one other thing I forgot to mention while going over the chart there is actually that every character gains energy whenever you grab an energy orb. Now, this does vary for certain passives and whatnot, to where some characters don't get that energy, but for the most part, when you pick up an orb, every character is going to get a certain amount of energy, and that is definitely going to vary on those different elements. So when Albedo picks up his orb, he's going to get a ton of energy for himself because it was his own orb. But when he does grab that orb, everybody gets a little bit of energy, and it's going to vary based on their element, but they are all going to get just a little bit of energy. And then another character, as I said, Zhao was a special case to where his burst costs 70, and he does generate some really solid orbs. However, you do want to be careful when generating orbs with Zhao, because if you do his E's a little bit too quickly, you're not going to generate all of the orbs you could have, because there's kind of a cooldown on the actual orb generation. So if you spam it real quick, you're not going to get as many orbs as you would have otherwise. So you can see how this can really vary from character to character, and how you're going to need to play them to adapt to get the most energy, as well as adapt their energy recharge stat to most effectively get their elemental burst as much as possible. Now, I know I made that about as complicated as it possibly could be, but I hope it gave you guys a little bit more perspective on energy recharge, how it works, some of the things that you can do to get some more energy recharge yourself, and just kind of help you guys out for your elemental burst spam teams, as they are really fun, and I highly recommend trying them out if you have the resources to, or if you want to, as they're just a ton of fun. But as I said, it can really vary from character to character on the kind of energy recharge value you're going to want. I give you guys some of those typical milestones just as a starter to go from, but you're definitely going to want to pay attention to the different E-skills, as Genshin Impact has a lot of very unique characters that work in very unique ways, so you're going to want to pay attention to that when you're building for your elemental burst spam teams. Anyway, that's pretty much going to be it for the video. I really hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope this was very informative. I'm going to have another informative video out this week. I wanted to make this for some of the new players that are still coming into the game. I get plenty of comments all the time that are like, I'm still newer to the game, how do I do X thing? I saw somebody the other day, it's like, hey, I just hit AR 35 and my damage is terrible, which is what our next video is going to be on. We're going to be talking about how to most effectively, bump up your damage in the early stages of the game. I know a lot of vets here are probably like, I've been doing that all along. We've kind of got it down to a science at this point, but I don't think a lot of those people know that science, so I want to point it out to those people. Anyway, that was a long outro. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will catch you guys in the next one. As always, my name is Blossoms. Peace.